All right, looks like we are live. Welcome to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donny, and these are my two award-winning co-hosts, Matt and George Bond. Tonight, we are debunking the mythical Geologic Column, and we are refuting the critics. Gentlemen, Dr. Hovind, Matt, and George, thank you all for joining me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Okay, well, real quick, I'm going to go over the format, and then we're kind of just going to get right into it. This is going to be a lot of fun. So, everybody in the audience, get ready because we are going to be refuting some critics. Format-wise, we're going to have Kent. He's going to be doing about just 10 minutes, kind of laying down the foundation for the night, the Geologic Column, and whatever it is related to that. Then we're going to do about 10 minutes responding to some written comments from specific critics. Then we're going to get right into the video itself, the video defending the Geologic Column as if it exists as portrayed in the textbook. Then we get to the really fun part. We're going to open up the mic. Of course, we're going to keep it respectful. And I'll leave a link for everybody. You can join. If you have an argument or a question pertaining to the Geologic Column, we'll allow you a minute to present it, and then we will have Kent engage that argument or question. So that being said, why don't we just kind of get right into it? Kent, brother, thanks for being here. I hope you're feeling a little bit better. Always, I appreciate your time. So let's hand it to you, brother.
Well, thank you. Yes, I've been under the weather for 3 days now. Haven't eaten for 3 days. I had a high fever, lost some of my hair. Not my old age. Today's the oldest I've ever been. Donnie, I have a confession to make here. I finally had to switch my position. I now believe the Earth is flat. 70% of the Earth is water, and virtually none of it is carbonated. So the Earth is flat. Anyway,
I love it. Kent, you almost gave me a heart attack. Oh no.
The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot unlearn the lies they've been taught to believe. It's amazing how many things we believe that are just simply not true. And people are taught things for years. Lies they taught you in school. How many of you were taught that Napoleon was short? Well, they measured him in French inches at 5'2", but that's actually 5'7" in our English inches. He was taller than the average person of the time. It's a lie we've been taught for 200 years. How many have been taught if you drop a penny off the Empire State Building, it'll kill you when it hits the ground? Not true. It reaches a maximum speed because the penny flutters. It can only go 25 miles an hour, maximum. Oh, can I kill you? How many have been taught ostriches hide their head in the sand? Not true. They never do that. They poke their nose in to turn their eggs around to keep them baking on all sides. How many have been taught if you touch a frog, it'll give you warts? Not true. It's just a lie. People are taught all kinds of things, and they believe it. People are taught that the universe is self-existing and not created. Nobody made it. That is absolutely stupid. It's a lie. The universe came into existence 14 billion years ago. That's pure baloney. It's a lie, but you teach that long enough, people start to believe it. One of the biggest lies in history is the lie that the layers of the Earth are different ages. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's right-hand man, said if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. And that's what's happened. For the last 200 years, we've been teaching kids the layers of the Earth are different ages. They divided the Earth up into layers, gave each one a fancy name, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, and Jurassic, and Triassic, and Mississippian. And they gave each one an index fossil and assigned an age to it. All this was made up in the 1830s. There was no such thing as a geologic column. Now, 2,000 years before that, Peter warned us in 2 Peter 3, in the last days there shall come scoffers, walking after their own lust and saying, where's the promise of his coming? All things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation, for since this they are willingly ignorant, that by the word of God the heavens were of old. So the scoffers are ignorant of how God made the heavens. I covered that in great detail on my video number, here we go. Seminar part 2, what was the original creation like? Why did they live to be 900? Get my whole video series for $50, drdino.com. But the second thing they're ignorant of, Peter said, would be the flood. The world was overflowed with water. In Psalm 104, it talks about the end of the flood. At thy rebuke, they fled. See, thou coverest it with the deep as with a garment. God covered the earth with the water. The water stood above the mountains. At thy rebuke, they fled. At the voice of thy thunder, they hasted away. They go up by the mountains. They go down by the valleys unto the place which thou hast founded for them. Now, I love the King James and stick with it exclusively. However, some of the old English phrases don't really make as much sense today. And it's probably one of the rare times I'll ever use another translation to say, I think this is what they're trying to say here. The mountains rose, the valleys sank. At the end of the flood, the mountains lifted up, the valleys sank down, the water rushed off. The mountains rose, the valleys sank. And it's all kinds of different, it's simple. It's interesting, all the mountain ranges in the world seem to follow the coastlines. And the mountains of the world are folded up, fold mountains. We talk about this on video number 6 of my series. You can get the whole thing, $50, and then return it when you're done and get your money back. Donnie, I used to loan my DVDs out. I learned right away Christians don't steal, but they do borrow and never return. So I'm not going to loan it to you. You can buy it when you're done, give it back, get your money back. Meanwhile, I'm holding the $50, okay? It works out real good that way. So the mountain ranges formed at the end of the flood. The earth is 70% underwater. One atheist I was debating, he said, well, if the world was flooded, where'd all that water go? I said, it's in the oceans. They're huge. When I flew back from Australia to America, I told one of the guys in my office, I said, man, that Pacific Ocean is huge. He said, oh, that was just the top of it. Wow, what a thought. There's a lot of water out there, folks, okay? So the mountains lifted up at the end of the flood, and they're folded. Now, the layers that we see are folded. So stop and think. If each layer is a different age, and each layer was hard rock before it got bent, you're not going to bend hard rock. It's going to snap. It's going to have cracks in it. When I worked at General Motors at the front end department, they would paint the hood and the fenders upstairs and send them down on a conveyor belt. We took them apart and started the front end assembly for the C60, C65 GMC trucks. The rack that they got painted on, the parts would get painted, and the rack would also get painted every time it goes through the furnace, a new coat of paint. So I broke a piece off and made this heart. It has about 120 layers of paint. If I tried to bend it, they would all shatter. It wouldn't bend. Bent rock layers are proof all the layers were soft when they were bent. Duh. Doesn't take a brain to figure that out. Bent rock layers are found all over. They had to be soft. There's no fracture marks where sometimes they bend radically. There's no internal fracture marks. Hard rock doesn't bend. Well, mud layers bent, and then they hardened afterwards. It's real simple. But the Bible says the scoffers are ignorant of the flood. How they can look at this and analyze it and say, wow, there's no fracture marks. How can they not understand this is from the flood of Noah? This is not millions of years. But when I was taught in school that the layers of the earth are different ages, called the geologic column, I never questioned it. I said, well, it's got to be true. I'm sorry, it's not true. At the end of the flood, the crust of the earth was broken up like it still is today, and fragments of the Earth's crust were moving around, and they're still moving today. And we have fault lines, the San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, the New Madrid Fault. None of them are my fault, but the earth has lots of faults. I can name some more too if you'd like. But the plates of the earth are still moving around. Sometimes they slide under each other and lift one up. If they lift up slowly, the water will run off slowly, making rounded mountains. If they lift up quickly, the water runs off quickly and makes big canyons. The scoffers are ignorant of the flood, and they're ignorant of how God made the heavens, and ignorant of the flood, and they're ignorant of the coming judgment of God. We cover that in our video series, Whoa, What on Earth is About to Happen? About what the Bible says about the future. You can get that on our website, drdino.com. Anyway, textbooks tell the kids in school the Grand Canyon was formed by the Colorado River, carved out from solid rock. This is absolute baloney. Grand Canyon probably formed in less than a week. I'll show you. A lot of the problems started with a guy named James Hutton. James Hutton lived in the late 1700s. He wrote a book called Theory of the Earth. In that book, he said, oh, the earth is much older than everybody thinks. Up until that time, everybody was teaching, hey, the earth's about 6,000 years old, because that's what the Bible dates add up to. Get Genesis chapter 5. It says Adam was 130 when his son was born, and he was 105. You can add up the numbers from Genesis 5 and Genesis 11 after the flood. Anybody can make a chart like this or buy it from us on our YouTube channel, on our website, drdino.com. But the dates add up to about 6,000. But in the late 1700s, if you study your history, I was a history minor, I love studying history. This was a time of world history when many revolutions were going on. Some thought the Bible was an obstacle to their political goals. Oh, well, let's eliminate the obstacle. It's called the age of anti-monarchy. Get rid of the king. Most countries had a king or a monarch. They said, we don't like that kind of government. We want the rule of the people. Okay. So there was the American Revolution, the French, the Spanish, the Polish, the Italian, the German, getting rid of monarchy. Well, the Bible says to honor the king. And before we get into all the politics there, forget it, doesn't matter. The fact is, that was a time when people thought the Bible stood in their way. So, before radiometric dating was available, many people estimated the age of the earth to be only a few thousand years. This is from a textbook right here on my shelf. In 1700s, a Scottish scientist named James Hutton estimated it to be much older. He used the principle of uniformitarianism. Woo, big word. That'll be on the test, kids. Uniformitarianism means the way things are happening today is the way they've always been happening. This is not true. If I go down here on the highway, stand beside Interstate 65, and I see somebody headed, get on Interstate 10 down in Florida. I see somebody headed east going 70 miles an hour. Can I then calculate and say, wow, they started in California 4 days ago? No, they might have just got on at the last exit. You can't take what we see today and interpret it for millions of years in the past. Sure, if the mountains are lifting up a little bit today, what if they had a rapid uplift once and then it's slowly down since then? You can't know those things, okay? This is one of the lies in the textbooks, video number 4, lies in the textbooks, comes with the series here. I cover, I think, 30 lies in the textbook. Uniformitarianism, they say the present is the key to the past. No, the Bible is the only perfect key to the past. We do see the layers of the earth being uplifted and the crust of the earth being subducted, and sometimes they bang into each other and wrinkle. We'll cover all that some other time, but there's certainly a cycle. But the idea of uniformitarianism is baloney. But Hutton made up this idea that the way it's happening now is the way it's always been happening, and this is what the kids are taught in school. Kids, they're lying to you, or they're stupid. Well, I can't see another choice. Either they're dumb or they're lying. The idea that geologic features form slowly over long periods of time, that's uniformitarianism. For instance, they say South America and Africa seem to fit. Yeah, my house and the neighbor's house would fit too. Does that mean they used to be together? Duh, no. Uniformitarianism, we can cover that some other time, okay? But they apply this to crazy things kids are taught. Oh, hang on. Slide number 671, Alt-TV. There. I apologize, I've not been well, but James Hutton's book that he wrote in the 1700s had a profound influence on Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell was a lawyer from Scotland who hated the Bible. Somebody figured out the other day that if all the lawyers in the world were laid end to end around the equator, we would all be better off. But Charles Lyell, he wrote a book on principles of geology, and he's the guy who made up the stupid Geologic Column. In his book, Principles of Geology, I was meant to get that out. Can somebody see it on the shelf, the 10,000 shelves? I got all 3 volumes, doesn't matter. Principles, it's about this thick, big yellow paperback book. 1830, he published the first one. He said in that book, men of superior talent, he's talking about himself, who thought for themselves, in other words, if you don't agree with me, you're not thinking for yourself, and we're not blinded by authority, like the Bible. He said you reach false conclusions because you're based on ancient doctrines. He did every opportunity in his book. Of course, in 1830, it was kind of dangerous to mock the Bible too much because most people believed it, but he really slapped at it pretty hard, okay? He said, but he made fun of the Bible all through his writings. You can see that on video number 4 of my series. He said you have religious prejudice. He said his goal was to free the science from Moses. He said that clearly. He said, I don't like people believing the Bible. I'm going to stop that. Oh, and he invented the geologic column that we're still taught today. It's been modified a few times. He gave each of the layers of the Earth a different name and an age and an index fossil. They say the top layer is younger. I say, stop, guys, wait. Where's the new material coming from? If the top layer is younger, is it coming from outer space? If you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? We shake up a jar of dirt once in a while, let it settle out. It always settles into layers. This thing, just in the last couple of minutes, I flipped it over, probably made 15 layers. Is the top layer younger? No. All the layers form rapidly. Every speck of dirt on the planet is the same age unless it came in on an asteroid or meteor dust or something. Yeah, that's it. Bring them up here, brother, if you would. That's 2 and 3, yeah. One's around here somewhere. Charles Lyell really devoted his life to, that's volume 1, yeah. Volume 1, volume 3, I don't know where 2 is, doesn't matter. These are the books where he made up the stupid geologic column. Look, if you shake up a jar, it'll settle into layers. Does that mean the top layer is younger? No. They're all in the jar at the same time. How can the top layer be younger? Every layer of material is the same age. If I move it from here to here, that doesn't change the age of it. Think. The geologic column, does it exist? No, doesn't exist anywhere. Creation.com has a great article on that. Now, it's a fact the Earth has layers. There's no question. I've been to Grand Canyon, been to all 50 states, 70 countries. I love studying this stuff. The evolutionist says the layers are millions of years. I'm sorry, I've been to 37 countries. I've had 70 countries visit here. Evolutionist says the layers form slowly over millions of years. Now, wait. It's a fact the Earth has many layers. That's a fact. Is it a fact they form slowly? No, that's an interpretation. Creationist says these layers are all from the flood in the days of Noah. All the layers formed in 1 year. But the atheists and evolutionists are always trying to erase that line and make their theory part of the fact. See, the geologic column is actually the Bible for the evolutionist. It can only be found one place in the world, and that's the textbooks. This textbook, I admitted it, book's right here, Earth Science book, if there were a column of sediments. Unfortunately, no such column exists. It doesn't exist, folks. It's a joke. It's a hoax. It's a lie. And a lot of people believe it. A lot of people believe it. The global stack of index fossils exists nowhere on Earth. Most index fossils do not usually overlie each other with the same locality. You can read all the articles yourself, okay, technical journals. It doesn't exist anywhere on Earth. The geologic column does not exist and does not need to be explained by flood geology. Okay. But the textbooks all teach it like it's some kind of fact. If it was indeed in one place, it would be 100 miles thick. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. This is lie number 7 on my video series, lies in the textbooks on my series there. But this is the stuff kids have to learn in school. They got to learn these hard names, you know, and the index fossils for them. It is pure baloney. Let's see, here we have shale, 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 and shale. Well, how do you tell the difference between Osage shale and Perry Farm shale? What's the difference? They're both shale. Well, the difference is the index fossils they contain. How about this? Limestone, 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 limestone. What's the difference between Blackjack Creek limestone and Worland limestone? The index fossils. They're telling you the age of the layer by the fossils they find in it. Then they turn around and tell you the age of the fossils by which layer it comes from. This is pure circular reasoning. Hovind, I like to simplify things, make it small words and make it easier. It's dumb, real dumb, okay? Article is a detailed examination of the young Earth creationist claim that geologic column does not exist. It is shown that the entire geologic column does exist in North Dakota. Whoa. They found one place where now it doesn't mean the geologic column exists. It means the layers are in the order that Lyell put in his book. Well, you shuffle them enough times. I bet if we shuffle 10,000 decks of cards, get 10,000 people, everybody shuffle a deck of cards, okay? Somebody in that crowd's going to end up with all 4 aces together. Does that prove something? No. The fact that you find a bunch of layers that you think are at a certain age in one spot doesn't prove that the geologic column is legitimate. Hypersaline waters, wow. Okay, I cover this on video number 4. I'm going to get to something else tonight. These index fossils may have been found in order in some places, but that's a result of random shuffling. See creation.com, answersingenesis.org, ICR.org. They've all got great articles on this. So they gave each layer a name and an index fossil. They tell the kids the layers of Grand Canyon are each a different age. Stop and think. If that layer sat there for 5 million years waiting for the next one, don't you think there'd be some erosion marks between the layers? Isn't it going to rain once in a while in 5 million years? The layers are stacked like pancakes. There's no soil buildup between the layers. It's rock, 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 rock. Huh, interesting. Shake up a jar of sand, gravel, clay, and it'll settle out into layers for you in minutes. This whole geologic column is the Bible for the atheist and the evolutionist, and it doesn't exist anywhere. We get these sand toys you play with and make all kinds of layers. Here's what happens. The moon is up there right now pulling on our water, making a bump called the high tide. It holds that bump like a magnet, and we spin around once a day on Earth. But while we're spinning around, the bump of water is going up, down, up, down. Hold it. If the bump is coming up, where's the water coming to fill the bump? It's being pulled in from the side by moon's gravity, 230,000 miles away, depending on apogee or perigee. Okay. So at the North Pole, the Earth is spinning 0 miles an hour, and South Pole. At the equator, about 1,037. We're in Lenox, Alabama, 31 degrees above the equator. So at this latitude, you can do the trig on that and calculate the radius and diameter and all that stuff. I'll save you the hassle. I taught trig for years. But we're turning at this latitude about 886 miles an hour in Lenox, Alabama, which means if the moon pulled the water up, in order to fill that bump, the water has to rush in from the sides at 886 miles an hour. Now, there's already a lot of water, so it's just filling the bump. So not every speck of water is moving that speed, but it's gaining an extra 200 feet. Because if the Earth were covered with water, the tide would not get interrupted by banging into continents, and the tide would become harmonic. And harmonic tide on Earth would be a 200-foot tidal change every 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes. So at the equator, 1,037, Lenox, 886. So if the waters keep moving sideways at 886 miles an hour, up, not only is the tide going up and down, it's coming in and out. Whoa, that's going to take all the rocks and gravel and sand and roll them around against each other, make what's called a turbidity current, and it's going to round all the rocks off. Our whole gravel pit has trillions of rounded rocks. They call it river rock. Oh, that river goes from here to North Carolina? That's a big wide river, guys. I don't think so. Those rounded rocks are from the flood. You can get a rock tumbler and tumble rocks around, smooths them off. Noah's flood was a giant rock tumbler that tumbled all the gravel and sand. Come visit. How many rounded rocks do we have here? Trillions. Might even be quadrillions. I don't know. I'm not about to count them. You can count them if you want. I'll tell you what, let's get a government grant. I bet they'd let us do that. Yeah, okay. We have in our gravel pit 7 layers exposed. You can see it's gravel, sand, clay, gravel, sand, clay. These layers go all the way to North Carolina from Lenox. And they're telling me the layers are different ages. Guys, stop. No, they're not. The whole geologic column is dumb. The Bible says they delight in lies and the scoffers walk after their lust. We had this verse in here twice before. Okay. Textbook says Colorado River cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. No, that river did not make that canyon. That river is what's left over after the flood, water got too full, went over the top, washed out Grand Canyon, probably in less than a week. Anyway, you said take 10 minutes. How long did I take, brother? Whew, too long. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. No worries, brother. Tons of fantastic information and a great way to start the show and set the foundation for what we are going to address, Kent. So appreciate the visuals. And as we promised, we will be refuting the critics with half our brains tied behind our back. So, okay, let the fun begin. What we'll do is we'll start off with something simple before we get into the video. Matt, you've got the video ready, brother. So what I'll do is put up a comment from one of these critics. Kent, maybe we can respond to this, and then we'll just get right into the video. So this is from a critic who would say that the geologic column exists as it is portrayed in the textbook. So I can read it here, and then we can respond to it before we get into the video itself. So he says the geologic column is a specific sequence of rock layers. We don't always find all the rock layers, but we always find them in the same order, barring tectonic movement. By finding parts of this sequence in many different places, we can then reconstruct what the entire sequence looks like. As Ryan Christian, I believe is his name in the video that we're going to get to, said, we have places on Earth where only a few rock layers are missing from the sequence. We know that there is a specific order to the rock layer. So in other words, Kent, this is all a defense of the geologic column. I'd be curious as to your thoughts on that.
Okay, well, let's go back to my analogy of, let's get 10,000 people to shuffle decks of cards, okay? Is it possible that if I had 10,000 people scattered around the world, somebody's going to end up with all 4 aces together? We could probably calculate the odds of that. Let's say 1 out of 52 times 52 times 52, 52 to the 4th power. Unlikely, but it could happen. So how many layers, how many places on Earth are there that have rock layers? Almost everywhere. I mean, ask any well driller. You drill down, you hit certain layers, and they got to go through the layers to hit water, stuff like that. There are layers of coal. There's a seam of coal in Wyoming 300 feet thick. Pure coal, 300 feet. Well, if the water's coming up 200 feet and coming in at 900 miles an hour, it's going to knock all the trees down and make a layer of mud on top of them and bury them in hours. So it's true that there may be a few spots, random spots, where now go back to his question. Put his question back up. There's something I wanted to say about that. That was
yeah, let me get it right here.
Okay.
Oops. This one right here.
Yeah, okay. The geologic column is a specific sequence of rock layers. You should add into that right after, before the period, that was made up in the 1830s. Pure imagination. Okay, put my screen up here if you would, brother. They made up this idea that each of the layers, let's see, we have the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, the Cretaceous, Jurassic, Permian, Carboniferous. This was all made up in the 1830s. It doesn't exist anywhere. And stop and think. If the top layer is younger, where did it come from? Outer space? Can you think of another option? They say, well, volcanoes exude lava and magma and stuff. Yeah, it's true. It's still the same rock, just getting recycled. It's still the same age. They date the fossil layers by the layers by which kinds of fossils they find in them. It's pure baloney. Doesn't exist anywhere. Okay, go ahead. Was there more to his question I needed to answer?
Let me put it back on, but I know there'll be more elaboration during the video itself. So, yeah, you know what? Let's leave it at that, Kent. Okay. And Matt, brother, why don't we get you to start the first section of the video? Kent, I'll be looking at you. If you see a part that you want us to stop on and pause to make comments, just put your hand up like this, and then we'll know to pause it. But we'll make sure we don't go any more than, I don't know, a minute at a time. Matt, I think you're on mute, Matt.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. I'm just making sure that the screen is big as possible for everyone else to see.
Perfect. And as you're doing that, I want to remind everybody in the chat, we got 200 people live already. So I see people in the backstage. I appreciate you being there. I am going to leave you in the backstage until we do open up the mic after this response video here, and then we'll give you the opportunity to ask your questions. So anybody else who wants to join for that portion, click the StreamYard link. You can be a creationist as well. If you just have a question, feel free to click the link. I'll leave you backstage until we open it up. So, okay, here we go.
Okay, I hope the sound is going to be good. If it's not, I'll just be watching for you guys. Just give me a thumbs up. And here we go.
Column is one of the biggest lies ever taught in the history of the world. The geologic column does not exist. There's no such thing as a Jurassic Age or Triassic or Mississippian. It's all baloney.
Wow, the geologic column does not exist.
Wow. That'll be news to a lot of geologists.
Yeah,
including a number of creation geologists.
I know. It's quite surprising that he's willing to go this far out. But then again, he goes far out on a lot of things that a lot of people on his own side do not approve of. So maybe it's not too surprising.
Yeah.
And often, like, I hear the people like talking about the geologic column.
Yeah. Pause it there, Matt. Kent, let me just unmute you. Kent, you're good to go, brother.
If you can crank up their volume a little bit, I couldn't quite hear them, but what they've done so far is simply mocking. How can the layers be different ages, guys? Answer my simple question. Is the top layer coming from outer space? Or if not, how could it possibly be a different age? Could you please answer that question? And by the way, you were playing with the screen a minute ago. You could make it a little taller, make me lose about 5 pounds. That would help. So.
All right, here we go.
Doesn't exist one place in the earth. And it's like, yeah, you are all right. But the problem is that it just exists in lots of places in smaller pieces. And that doesn't make it any less the geologic column. It's just you're finding parts of it.
Yeah, I think where a lot of people get confused is what it's true that we don't find the entire geologic column in any one place.
Pause it there, Matt. So right there, Ken, it looked like for now that he admitted that, okay, it's true that they don't find it, in one single place on the planet, but that they find it in smaller pieces. And so that's, more or less their argument for the column itself.
Okay, let's go back to my card analogy here. I think we would agree that we could numbers can be put in order from 1 through 10. Okay, if I get enough people shuffling cards, and is it possible we could find a sequence where somebody gets a 3, 4, 5 together? Whoa, yeah. Somebody else across town gets a 7, 8, 9 together. Whoa, we found 2 pieces. We can put them together. I bet we could play around with this enough and make ourselves look real stupid, thinking that means anything. Okay. So what if you find certain layers all over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting all the layers. I got pictures of it here somewhere. Let's see. Polystrata, slide number 12. 12, is that it? No, I'll find it. But I ask guys all the time, guys, if you have a petrified tree, here they are, standing up, slide number 1239. Okay, Alt DV, 1, 2, 3, 9. Germany, France, British Isles, Nova Scotia, California, several eastern states have petrified trees called polystrata through different layers. Petrified trees standing up, connecting all the layers. Guys, how long does a dead tree stand up in your neighborhood before it falls down? 4 or 5 years, maybe? Not millions. Up in Joggins, Nova Scotia, there are hundreds of them, petrified trees standing up, running through all these layers that you're claiming are different ages. There's one in Yellowstone. I got a picture of me by it here 20 years ago, but they had put a fence around and people kept breaking off pieces of the petrified wood. So petrified trees in the standing position, running through multiple layers. Stop and would somebody please tell these atheists to give me a common sense answer? How can you get petrified trees standing up, running through multiple layers? Right here in central Alabama, there's a coal mine. A friend of mine works there. He said, Brother Hovind, we find them all the time. Vertical trees. We're mining down, he said they're mining through 2 different seams of coal with rock in between. Sometimes the petrified tree goes from seam of coal on the bottom through the rock to the next seam of coal. Now hold it. They tell the kids in school, first you got to grow a forest, which takes hundreds of years, and then it has to get buried and turned to coal, which takes millions of years, and then you got to get more rock on top. How can you have a petrified tree connecting 2 rock layers that are millions of years different, or coal layers that are millions of years different? You can't. It's not true. They're lying or they're stupid, okay? They mine out the coal, find trees standing up all the time. He sent me a couple pieces in our museum here. I'm going to call the guy and get some more. Coal seams. Here we go. You got the Blue Creek and the Mary Lee Formation with petrified trees connecting them. He said, Brother Hovind, we find them all the time. Sample A goes down through the Blue Creek, petrified tree. Sample B goes down, but sample H goes up through the Mary Lee. But look at that. They both go through this central layer. That would be, in any court of law, evidence, the layers formed rapidly, like less than a year, like the Bible says. Specimen Ridge in Yellowstone has 27 layers of petrified trees, 27 layers of forests. They didn't grow there. They were transported there by a flood. 30-foot petrified tree in Kettle Mine, Cookeville, Tennessee. Huh. That's to a SEMA coal here and a SEMA coal here. Now, when you carbon date them, they give really wild different dates. Right. Why are the coal seams always nearly found on top of layers of clay? That's a poor soil for trees to grow in. It was from the flood. David Reeves up at David Reeves Ministry, RIVES, up in Tennessee, he take you out and show them to you. Petrified vertical trees. Hello. Joggins, Nova Scotia, where they find thousands of them. Petrified trees in the vertical position. Now, you guys might get upset that your geologic column is being destroyed psychologically, because I know that is your Bible. The geologic column is the Bible to the evolutionists. Ian Juby, good friend of mine, ianjuby.org, he shows petrified trees up in Canada running through all different layers. It's just simply not true. We're teaching kids a lie. Science has a long history of teaching things that are dumb. I gave a few examples earlier. There's hundreds more. One of the dumbest things they're teaching now is that the earth is billions of years old when it can't be. They're teaching life came from non-living material. That's dumb. They're teaching dinosaurs lived millions of years ago, which is stupid. No, they did not. They lived with man. People called them dragons and killed most of them. I covered that on video number 3 of my series about dinosaurs in the Bible. But petrified trees standing up, connecting all the layers. Wait a minute. How can the layers be different ages? This is just pure baloney. They found this fossil of a fish with his nose stuck in rock that's 1 million years older than the rest of the head. Oh, he balanced on his nose for 1 million years waiting for the layers to form. You'd have to go to school for years to be that stupid. Creation, the evidence from polystrata fossils. There's articles. It's common. I don't know why they don't teach it. I do know why they don't teach it. It destroys their theory. Evolutionist has only 2 choices. Sometimes the trees are upside down, root end up. I think you got another problem now, okay? 2 choices. They can say, well, the trees stood upright for millions of years while the sediment formed around them. You want to believe that? I got some property to sell you. Or you can say the trees grew through hundreds of feet of solid rock looking for sunlight. There's a third way to resolve that. Maybe the trees were buried in a big flood. Yeah. So I'm sorry, these guys need some serious help. Tell them to call me, I'll debate. Normally I'd do half my brain to hide behind my back. With those two, 90% of my brain tied behind my back.
Well, that would work because they do claim to be a young Earth creationist, Kent. But I like to say 99.9% Evo, maybe 0.1% young Earth creationist with these arguments. Okay, Matt, if you want to share screen, brother, and let's get to their next argument here and see what what they can bring us to the table. So, okay, here we go. Here we go.
It did not offer me to share my mic, so if it's not working, I don't really know.
Well, I think there's when you share a screen and you want to play the audio, in the bottom left-hand corner, it says audio with a box. Did you make sure that it was checked?
I didn't see it.
Check mark.
I'll just do it again. Share screen.
No worries. Yeah, like I can see it. For me, it says share system audio. Do you see that?
No. No, I don't. Very strange.
Okay.
At least you guys can hear it. I'll just turn it up again all the way.
Okay. All right. No worries. Okay. Share screen, and then we'll see how it says.
Okay, here we go.
We wouldn't really expect to because geologic history is complicated. Nevertheless, there are places where it is mostly complete, like the Grand Staircase. At the bottom, you've got the Precambrian layers, and at the top in Bryce Canyon, in that area, you have stuff from the lower Cenozoic. And also in caves in the Grand Canyon, you have Ice Age fossils like ground sloths. They found caves where these ground sloths were actually resting. Those were their dens. Wow. We found like droppings, so these really thick layers of sloth droppings.
Wow, that's crazy. I did not know
stop it there. And Ken, I can reiterate the arguments too, in case some of it's hard to hear. So they're saying, okay, you know, mostly we don't find the layers in the so-called sequence. One thing that I found very interesting that they said was, well, we wouldn't expect to find all the sequences. But to me, this is what I like to say is ad hoc. They're just saying that after the fact, I believe, in order to maybe rescue the geologic column, because from my research, I've never seen any uniformitarian scientists predict this sequence before the sequence was, as you've pointed out from Lyle, you know, come up with. But they said we may find most of them, most of these layers or sequences in the Grand Canyon. Any thoughts on those points, Brother Kent?
Well, the Grand Canyon, I've been there many times, studied it avidly. I taught earth science 15 years. It's a big gash in the ground. There's no possible way that little Colorado River made that Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon formed in less than a week. Come to it, take our tour of our dinosaur adventureland. We'll show you. We're going to build a demonstration of that to show how it happens. So if these guys claim they're young earth creationists, they're an embarrassment to the cause, okay? They don't understand half what they're talking about. The layers all formed rapidly. The fossils that are connecting the layers prove they formed rapidly. And what fossils are found in the layer, they were talking about the index fossils that are found. That's really what they're finding and saying, well, index fossils in a certain order. Here's the problem with that. Let me get to index fossils, home. Okay. This happened when they made up the geologic column. They made up an index fossil for each column. They said, if you find this fossil, here we go, index fossil, slide 747. Oh, DV. So if you find this type of clam, therefore it's assigned this age. And they teach this to all the kids in school, like it's some kind of fact, okay? They say, well, boys and girls, generally clams are found at the bottom. Therefore, that proves clams evolved first. And birds are found at the top. Therefore, birds evolved last. I say, guys, stop and think. Clams are found at the bottom because clams are already at the bottom when the flood starts. Duh, they're the first ones going to get buried. Hello? And when their world changes and things are going chaotic, they clam up. All over the world, petrified clams are found in the closed petrified position, like this one. We have hundreds of them here. Petrified closed clams indicate rapid burial because clams open when they die. You hardly ever find a matched pair of seashells. They say birds are found on top because birds evolved last. Guys, birds are the last ones to drown in a flood. Hello? They can fly around till they run out of gas. And when they do, they got hollow feathers and hollow bones and they float. Hello? It's nothing to do with evolution. The fossils are sorted a little bit based upon habitat, where they live, based upon body density. Clamshells are a little denser than bird feathers. Based upon mobility, clams can't run very fast. And based upon intelligence. As far as anybody's been able to figure out, clams aren't too smart. So I think that's the order of sequence based on those factors, nothing to do with evolution. Nobody's ever seen a clam produce a baby that was anything other than a clam. So why do they say, because we find them in some kind of order, therefore this one turned into this one and this one turned... Guys, nobody's ever seen any animal or plant produce babies other than their same kind. Nobody ever has. Every farmer in the world will tell you, cows produce cows without exception, dogs produce dogs, pine trees produce pine trees. Now you might get some wild varieties within that category, but they're still the same. There are 115 different kinds of pine trees. Might have had a common ancestor called a pine tree. It doesn't prove we're related to a flea. So they don't get it, brother. I don't see any hope for them, but maybe they'll come around. So no, there is no such thing as a geologic column. They might find these fossils that they have assigned a fossil to each layer, an index fossil. You might find them in that order randomly, just like you might randomly shuffle the cards and find 1, 2, 3 together sometime. Whoa, what do I got here? Oh, no, I don't have a 1, 2, 3. Oh, I got a Jack King, almost got a sequence. If I had a queen, that would prove something to somebody somewhere. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, Matt, put it back up on screen. There's a couple points I know they're about to make that I think Kent's going to have fun addressing. So as always, I'll be writing down what's saying as well in order to reiterate if necessary. But go ahead, Matt, whenever you're ready, brother.
Higher column, because again, geologic history is complicated.
Really, we wouldn't expect to, right? That's right. It's more of a feature of how geology works rather than something that we would expect. Finding the entire geological column is not a prediction of geology.
Right.
We wouldn't even expect that because the sediment has to be eroded from someplace, right, to be deposited elsewhere.
All these layers formed at the same time. They say the top layer is younger. I say, really? Where did it come from?
Oh my. All the layers formed at the same time? No. Is there any like flood model where anybody would argue that like all of the layers formed at the same time?
Not positive. Can't go ahead, brother.
Oh no, they asked, would anybody argue all the layers formed at the same time? I was just saying I would. That's the only logical explanation. There's no other explanation for polystrata fossils. And for the rock layers being bent and not cracked. All those bent rock layers I showed you earlier, there's no fracture marks. They were bent while they were all soft mud. 1 year flood. Anyway, go ahead.
And then I think what they say next, Kent, is, well, you know, even a creationist would have to say that Adam and Eve and the original, you know, created kinds, they would have to be standing on some kind of rock, right? They would have earth to stand on. So would that then be, you know, created rock that wasn't formed by the flood? Or, you know, what would be a good response to that, Kent?
Well, God created the earth to be inhabited. It says he made it to be inhabited. And I think it's much nicer standing on rock than it is standing on mud. So, but there's several different types of rock. There's sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic. I'm not sure what the original creation, what they were standing on, but I doubt it was any sedimentary rock because that comes from sediment. So it might have been just simply created. I don't know. But that's a minor point compared to what they're claiming, that the layers are different ages based upon the fossils they find in them. It doesn't make any sense. Wish they'd stop and think about it.
Right. Good point. Good point. Oh, yeah. George, go ahead, brother.
They also said that the layers can't form at the same time. Well, coming from an engineering background, we have done Flume experiments, and anyone can do these and actually show that these layers can form at once and very quickly, by the way, not millions of years. So I'll show some of those examples a bit later on.
Yeah, especially George. I know you had a couple things on the you know, the law of superposition, but I think that's the next portion of the video. So Matt, I'll put you back up on screen.
That's a little problematic too, because I mean, obviously I wasn't there, but Adam and Eve and the animals were standing on something. Pretty sure it was rocks. So you'd have at least some geology present from the very beginning when God creates the earth. So
yeah, you can't just remove like everything. Not to mention it all being deposited at the same time. Like I get like he's trying to argue it's not millions of years, which I obviously agree with, but to argue that it's all laid down at the same time, I mean, that's not even possible, especially since we have like erosion features in the geologic column where we can tell like something was laid down, it was eroded away and deposited somewhere else. That's not at the same time. That's sequential.
Right, yes. And also, in addition to having a sequence during the flood, we also have some deposits formed after the flood.
Every time people come to our tour here, we show them this little jar.
Matt, pause it there real quick, brother. Kent, what would you think about the argument from, you know, specific rocks being eroded, laying down elsewhere, which would, you know, give us more of a sequence rather than laid down at the same time? Any specific thoughts on that?
Well, I think many creationists have studied this problem and think probably the original created rock was granite. Because granite, if you melt granite down, it doesn't reform into granite. It forms into rhyolite. Nobody's for sure how granite is made. Other than that might be the original created rock. And granite contains what are called radiopolonium halos. I was going to try to find the slides on that. I've got 45,000 slides, okay? So it would kind of help if you'd ask the questions in the same order that I got the answer. But, so I think the radiopolonium halos I cover on video number 7 in great detail. I can't find the slides right now. But I think probably they were on granite rock with a layer of soil for plants to grow in, like all over the world today. Well, mostly all over the world. So I lost part of your original question, though. Say it one more time.
About the erosion, they'll say, well, you know, we don't always find the column in all of its sequence, but that's because of erosion. You have, you know, deposits being kind of moved around elsewhere. And
that's a reasonable statement, but did it happen to erode the entire era? Didn't it erode partway into the next one? That's why I said earlier, there are no erosion marks between the layers. If it really was erosion going on, isn't going to make a few grooves someplace? It's all, those layers are stacked like, you know, a deck of cards, you know, on top of each other, or pancakes. There's no erosion marks between the layers. No, all the layers formed at one time, 1 year during Noah's flood, and all the layers, all the canyons formed at the end of that. The Bible says in Psalm 104, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down, the water rushed off. If the ground came up quickly, the water would run off quickly and carve canyons deep quickly. The top of Grand Canyon is 5,000 feet higher than where the river enters the canyon. Whoa, rivers don't flow uphill in Arizona. So that used to be a giant lake behind where Grand Canyon is now. And we cover that on, let's say, video number Grand Canyon. You just need to watch my whole video series. I cover all this. I'll find it. Oh, here we go. There's some more rock layers pushed up the Himalaya mountains. Grand Canyon. Nope. Grand Canyon. I won't take time for it now, brother. They mentioned Ice Age fossils. I think there certainly was an Ice Age. I think that came simultaneous with the flood. If you watch my video number 2, I talk about the canopy theory. I'm a strong believer as a creationist that the earth was surrounded by a canopy of ice above the atmosphere. Now, some other creationist groups do not agree with that. They're wrong. I'm right, okay? There used to be a layer of ice, probably 2 or 3 fingers thick, above the atmosphere. Today, the air above the earth goes up about 30 miles, depending on where you're located, and lunar tide and all that kind of stuff, okay? But the layer of air used to be probably only 10 miles thick, with a couple inches. The Hebrews taught it was 2 fingers or 3 fingers thick, a crystalline canopy. And I give all the evidence for that on video number 2 of my series, Seminar Part 2. This super cold ice in contact with outer space is cold, like minus 450 Fahrenheit. I believe that canopy, when the fountains of the deep broke open, it would have shot things up from the ground and busted that canopy, and the super cold ice would snow on the North and South Pole. So there was a rapid ice age by a rapid dump of ice from the canopy collapsing. The ice pouring down on the North and South Pole would push out toward the equator till it ran out of gas, and it would carve out terminal moraines, lateral moraines, isostatic rebound. You'd have all the glacial effects in weeks, not millions of years. So yes, I think there was an ice age, and I think it came simultaneous with the flood. And then those giant ice caps covered the earth for probably 200 or 300 years after the flood. It would take a long time for ice that much ice to melt back. So when Noah gets off the ark, the continents are much bigger than they are today, because a whole lot of water is still trapped at the North and South Pole. Over the next few hundred years, while people are having babies and spreading out around the world, the ice is slowly melting back to its current location today. That melting ice raises the ocean level, and that's why we have a continental shelf. There's 2 parts to the ocean, the deep part called the abyss and the shallow part called the continental shelf. So people say, Hovind, how did the kangaroos get to Australia? They hopped. That's how they get everywhere. The water between Australia and Vietnam is about 30 to 50 feet deep from here to the back wall. That's it. If you lowered the oceans 50 feet by freezing that water and sticking it on the poles, and the ocean's average 12,000 feet deep, So taking out 50 feet is going to be nothing. If you lowered the oceans 50 or 100 feet, freeze the water, stick it on the poles, all the continents are connected. The English Channel, 30 miles wide, what, 60 feet deep? Got a few deeper spots than that. But so they had several hundred years after the flood, they could walk anywhere. Then as the water's melting, ice is melting, running water into the oceans, making them deeper and wider and colder. Now all of a sudden, some animals are trapped. Used to be a land bridge from Australia to Vietnam. It's now underwater. Oh, kangaroos are safe from their predators. So I cover that in video number 7. Go ahead.
Okay, Ken, I appreciate that, brother. The next portion of the video I actually have in written form. He actually left you a comment specifically. So instead of enduring more of this video that I think you've adequately responded to, I'm going to put it up on screen. And actually, before I do, Ken, here's something curious to me. If we're just moving around already existing, right, pre-existing sediments from the sedimentary rock record, how can they then accumulate? Is that a question that makes sense? You know,
Yeah,
because they're trying to say it.
That's why I say, where's this new material coming from? You
Right.
can't build up layers. You just can't do it.
It's just moving from one place to another.
Right. Shuffling, moving cards from here to here doesn't change the age of them. They don't get it.
Okay, so here's the last part of this specific critic, and then in George, I know you had something to say here, and then I've got one person backstage actually currently that can ask a question or two, and then we'll kind of start winding it down. So okay, so I got it up on screen. So he says the law of superposition. This was a comment to you directly, Kent. Says that strata which overlay others were deposited later in time. There are obvious exceptions like tectonic activity and intrusion, but when those factors are not present, the law is correct. If there's any thoughts you had on that first paragraph, then we can get to the next one. It's up to you, brother.
Yeah, he's correct. The law of superposition means the one on top is younger, okay? How much younger? I just made a bunch of layers here with my little sand toy. Does that mean they're millions of years different in age, or could they all form in, 30 seconds? I think the Bible says the flood lasted for 1 year. So I think the layers, top to bottom, maximum difference in age is a year, not millions of years. So the superposition, if it's on top, it's younger. That's common sense. Probably, if I shuffled a deck of cards, would it be logical to say this card is younger? No. It might have been placed there most recently, but they're all the same age, all of them. So this law of superposition, they take it way too far and say that because somebody 200 years ago started teaching the age was millions of years, therefore we got to keep teaching that stupid stuff. That's insane. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, so here is the next part. So he's saying your argument's a straw man because no one is claiming that sediment gets younger when it is redeposited. When sediment is eroded and redeposited, it creates a new or a young new sedimentary layer.
Okay,
and that's more or less. Go ahead.
Stop and think what he just contradicted himself. If a sediment gets redeposited, he says it is a new, younger layer. It's the same dirt, guys, same dirt. You moved it. It's not different age. How can they not get it? Hope these guys don't drive on the highway, man.
And I'd like to point out, I think before we bring in the couple people backstage, this is George. I think this is something you wanted to talk about the Flume experiment. So we did a flood boundaries conference. We had two geologists, John Mackay, the creation guy, and also Joseph Hubbard, who talked about these experiments and how multiple strata can build laterally and vertically simultaneously due to hydrologic sorting, and how that poses a problem for the geologic column. Ken, I'm not sure if you had any thoughts on that, but George, I know you wanted to jump in too, bro.
No, he's correct. Go ahead.
Okay, can I share the screen for maybe 5 minutes or so?
Sure, go ahead, brother.
Okay.
Here it is.
Can you see me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, we're all aware of this particular so-called column that I think Dr. Hovind actually showed it earlier. But a couple of things I'd like to say about this is the erosion. These are secular erosion rates. I believe it's around about 6 centimeters per 1,000 years. They equate that to around the entire Earth's landscape being eroded to sea level in something like 10 to 12 million years. Even if you allow for mountains of rock, they push that out to around 43 to 44 million. Let's round it off at 50 million just for the sake of it. So effectively, every 50 million years, you'd expect this particular, the Cenozoic, for example, to be almost eroded down flat. You wouldn't see it. But in a deep Earth's age scenario, where we're talking 3.5 billion years, where I'm subtracting the 1 million years for it to cool down to its current form, that equates that entire column would erode over 200 times. Okay, so they effectively have to recreate those layers 200 times to get that current geologic column. But the other thing that most people don't actually look at in terms of this column, apart from the erosion, the lack of erosion between the preceding layers, is a thing called fulgurites. Now, I've spoken about fulgurites before, but I'll quickly just show you some information on fulgurites. This is okay. This is a paper in Nature. Okay, so I'm not making this up. When the lightning actually hits the Earth, it creates these things that we call fulgurites. You can see the lightning going through the rocks there. But these are remnants of those fulgurites eroded near the seashore. But you get these lovely structures where the lightning has actually hit. Okay, you can see there it actually can go through multiple rock layers. So the interesting part about this is when you do the maths, you'd expect around 7,400 fulgurites per square meter on the surface. But let's say, okay, if these were distributed evenly over supposedly 19 layers in the geologic column, that averages to 390 fulgurites per square meter per geologic column layer. Now, the question is, why don't we find these fulgurites in the preceding layers? We don't find erosion marks in these preceding layers, but we don't find these fulgurites either, because lightning would have been part of the atmosphere over those billions of years. Okay, that's all I want to say about the fulgurites. So I'm just going to go back to, oops, excuse me, just bear with me. All right, so a big plug to our friends at Creation Research, John Mackay, Jason Hubbard, Diane Eager, and the rest of the team. Now, I've actually donated to these Flume experiments. Most people haven't really heard about rotary Flume experiments. Okay, we've all seen, or hopefully we've all seen the linear ones, but this is what can happen in a rotary Flume. Not only the layers actually reproduce, but also the landscapes. Now look at these landscapes. Some of you might actually, sort of fit those landscapes in something that you've seen on the Grand Canyon or somewhere around the different parts of the world. So that's a rotary Flume. So the other thing that we have found, not just the Creation Research, Marble, ICR, etc., but even secular universities that do Flume experiments on a regular basis, rock layers grow sideways. And I'll show you a little video in a while, which shows that these fossils that supposedly oldest at the base and youngest at the top is not really true. But before I do that, I'd like to show you, these are some of the Flume experiments that Creation and Research have reproduced. Now, these are done purely by adjusting various parameters in the flume, like the quantity of water, the velocity, the direction of the flow, etc. And please note the different formations that you see there. They're very, very similar to the geological formations that you see in secular literature. Look at those. Here's one where they've actually formed these in 20 minutes and not millions of years as you would see them in the textbooks. They form parallel to the current. Okay, so these anticline and synclines that we keep hearing that would take millions of years and heat and pressure to produce. Sorry, guys, they can be reproduced in a Flume experiment. Now, the other one is this, the latest research that AIG have done are on the Tapete sandstone, especially the 90-degree bends. You'll see that from this diagram down here, that the Tapete sandstone is actually at the base of the Great Unconformity. That's an erosion mark of the original surface, okay? But it's important to note that these bends are 90 degrees. The secular explanation to this is it occurred deep down under heat and pressure. Now, we know when heat is involved, we get what we call metamorphism. You would see evidence of metamorphism if heat was involved. Now, AIG have done, apart from the history of this, when they originally applied for a permit to do this work, the Grand Canyon Committee refused them. So they took them to court. They went back. They got their permit, and they've done the results. And guess what? They found no evidence of metamorphism in that sand layer in that 90-degree bend. So, guys, that secular explanation is now debunked. Okay, it's debunked. There's another good view of the 90-degree bends. This is something that we keep bringing up. I remember.
And George, I'm gonna jump in there, brother. Fantastic points. Maybe if you could wrap it up in, I'd say 20 to 30 seconds, because I do want to make sure that we have the people backstage to ask Kent a couple questions.
Okay, well, I'll show you that little video that I had compiled. It's only about I think about a minute long, but tell me if the volume's correct. This one, by the way, is called Sedimentary Layers in the Laboratory. It's taken from a segment from Evolution, Fact or Belief. You can find it yourself. You can take a screenshot, but here it goes.
Of heterogeneous sand particles.
Why is this important? Well, quite simply, because strata have been used to date sedimentary rocks, and the fossils in them are over 100 years. And
it's kind of low, George.
There is experimental proof to show
I've got it on full.
Strata form.
Maybe what we'll do is send me that video, and I'll put it in the description box for people to check out.
Either fossils or rocks.
Because it is kind of
well,
low.
you can read the subtitles as well if the volume's not too. But what they're really explaining there is as you can see, the fossils at the base are not necessarily the oldest ones. Purely by the hydraulics of the way the layers are actually composed, the actual fossil at the top layer can actually be older than the fossil at the base.
Are the same age as those in the bottom strata.
So I'll grab that.
In the same layer of sediment.
No, I'll do it.
Then
here we go.
heavy
Copy.
Layer of sediment arrives, and more sea creatures are trapped.
Should I stop it there, Donny?
More important is the ones at the top.
Well, I got to say, this is an amazing argument against deep time. Yeah, if you wanted to kind of sum it up as well, and then I'll put the video in the description box too for people to look at.
Oh, effectively, that video sums everything up. That's the extent of the video, by the way. And
send it to me.
Just to go back. All right, we're at the front. So you can see quite clearly that in Flume experiments, we can actually recreate pretty much every geologic formation that you see in textbooks through real science, by the way, real science. I always say we are the ones that are doing the real science. We're showing them these Flume experiments, how they actually form, and they deny it purely because they've assumed the presuppositions of deep time and the index fossils and all the other baloney that we keep hearing from them. No scientific proof, just complete assumptions and presuppositions.
Amen, George. Well said. Appreciate it. Before I bring in the, I still see him backstage. Kent, any thoughts, any points you kind of wanted to add to that before we go to the next portion?
I was not aware of that video, but the one the French guy did 30 years ago is very similar to that. Experiments in stratification done at the Colorado Springs, I think. Navy has a, believe it or not, or Navy has something in Colorado. A huge flume where they do this very same thing, and layers form, multiple layers form horizontally, not vertically. Good point. Thank you, George. Go ahead.
Awesome. Great stuff. Go ahead, George.
I've got those videos as well, but they're like 3-part series, part 1, 2, and 3, and they're a bit too long to show. I thought that was a good summary at the end of, how they use the index fossils to show that the fossil at the top is younger than the fossil at the bottom. Or sorry, but we've just shown you experimentally that the fossil at the bottom layer can actually be the younger fossil and not the one at the top.
All right, George, you are a warrior. Appreciate those comments. Kent, you've been doing a great job as well. Matt, you're going to get an award for your screen sharing tonight. So I've got Andrew, or a rational empiricist in here. So I do want to keep it on the geologic column and the points discussed. So maybe you had an objection. I do thank you for being here. An objection or a question for Kent, Andrew. So I can vouch for Andrew. He's always respectful, although, of course, we disagree. But he's been here many times. So, Andrew, thanks for being here. Introduce yourself real quick. And if you had a question or objection or something for Kent, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. My name's Andrew, of course. I'm often in the side chat of these discussions. But basically what I want to talk about, or try to explain at least, which I think I can do if I kind of, let's see if this will, or I guess what I'm going to try and do is explain some of the principles behind what we're actually doing with biostratigraphy and whatnot with these relative dating methods, which I saw some kind of information about it, but I didn't see a full explanation, or not all of the details addressed, I think, or all the nuances and nitty-gritty of it. And so I kind of want to demonstrate that. I kind of drew up a little diagram here, if I can kind of, let's see. I'm going to adjust my camera so I can show it. Hopefully this works.
Are you trying to share? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I kind of literally just drew it up right now, but is it showing okay, or do I need to adjust it?
It's a little blurry, but I can put it full screen if you want to give a brief explanation followed by maybe a question or a point, and then we'll allow Kent to give his thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, and you can still hear me from over here. I'm kind of behind my camera.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, that's good. Yeah, so what I basically want to explain is what we're actually doing with these. You can see my hand here, right?
Yes.
Okay. What we're basically doing is we have these multiple localities, different formations stacked on top of each other, which these formations can be different depositional environments. That kind of answers one question from earlier, is where is the sediment coming from? It's coming from deposition, mainly from the uplift of other areas, erosion gradually wearing down the sediments there and carrying them away to a low-lying spot like an ocean floor or a river delta, for example, and being deposited there. But anyways.
Actually, Andrew, right there is a good point, I think, for us to at least stop at right now.
Sure.
in terms of where the sediment's coming from, since that would be an answer to one of Kent's questions, and then we'll
Sure, fair enough.
allow Kent to respond there. So appreciate it. Kent, brother, over to you.
Well, yeah, I think you just proved my point. If it's erosion, washing it down to a river delta and forming a new layer, it's still the same dirt. You didn't change the age of it. You moved it. You can move it
Right,
several
that's
different ways.
what I'm getting to,
You
though.
you can move it with a backhoe or a shovel. You can move it with a river stream. It's not changing the age of it. So the only way you're going to get the ages to be different, the layers to be different ages, is to bring it in from outer space. You did not answer the question.
Well, basically, well, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if they were somehow hypothetically deposited on top of one another from outer space, you'd still say that they're intrinsically not necessarily different ages, correct?
Well, that's begging the question. As far as on Earth, which is really all we can examine.
Well, it's a hypothetical example. I'm just kind of probing your logic here.
Yeah. If stuff kept falling on the Earth from outer space, then we could say, as far as the Earth is concerned, these layers formed at different times. But we have petrified trees connecting all the layers. We have the logic.
Hold on a sec, just before you go on there, because you're saying that just the sheer fact of deposition alone doesn't show that it's one age or another. But here you're saying if they were deposited from outer space, that they're necessarily different ages. That kind of contradicts what you said right there.
Well, theoretically, based on the Big Bang, every speck in the planet, in the universe, is the same age, 13.772 billion. So you can't have any speck of dirt or rock any other age than 13.772 billion. So what you're really finding with your geologic column and carbon dating and potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead-208, lead-206, all of them, they're trying to find something that matches what they've already decided. I suspect, I don't know who you are, rational empiricist, but I suspect you believe in evolution, and you've already decided the evolution theory is true, and we have to defend it. Is that your position? Do you believe evolution is true?
Well, we're here to talk about the geologic column, not necessarily evolution, so that's kind of off the top.
Right.
So yeah, that's a fair point. Like, how do we know that these deposited layers basically are intrinsically different ages? And that's what I'm going to try and explain here, kind of with this little diagram. Basically, a little key right here where these red circles are, you can just consider those to be igneous deposits, igneous layers. So like an ash deposit, for example, from a volcano, or a lava flow, for example. And typically, of course, they go on more than once. So you get multiple of these igneous layers in between sedimentary layers that were where sediments were deposited, for example. And what we're doing basically is, say you have one locality, you can use radiometric dating, for example, to date the igneous layers. That helps you bracket the layers in between and the layers above using these stratigraphic principles, for example. Now, the other thing is, how do we know that this geologic column over here, for example, is really a thing globally? Is because we can correlate these different localities, basically these different stacked up formations, using what you mentioned earlier, the index fossils. So, for example, we have the index fossils, just for simplicity's sake, throughout these different layers, and you can correlate them. You can show that, okay, this bit right here has the same index fossils as these layers, even though they may be different depositional environments, different sediments involved. And that shows, okay, these layers are correlated. Now, using the radiometric dating techniques from these, or the ages from these igneous layers, you can bracket the ages here. So, for example, if this is 80 million years, this layer right here, this is 70 million years, you can bracket the ages between these different localities. For example, that's how we determine the geologic column. Now, you may ask, okay, how do we exactly determine?
Actually, Andrew, let's stop right there then, just to make sure we don't get too much on the table. Appreciate that and the visual, and I'm going to unmute Kent. Kent, go ahead, brother.
Well, notice he keeps mentioning radiometric dating. That wasn't invented till the 1950s. Okay, way before that, they were teaching these layers are different ages and millions of years. So that way before, it predates radiometric dating. And when you take a sample in to get it radiometrically dated, they will keep testing it until they find the number they want, because they know it's supposed to be this old, and they've got all kinds of excuses they can use why the radiometric test didn't work. Contamination, is the big one. Something got contaminated. So they actually date the layers by the types of fossils they contain. They're called index fossils. Here we got limestone or shale found all through the geologic column. How do you know the difference between Labette shale and Perry Farm shale? They're both shale. Or limestone. You can take any of the sedimentary rocks you'd like. They date them by the fossils, which is based on the assumption that evolution is true. They've already decided they've got a chain of events of animals turned from an amoeba to a whale over billions of years, and it went from single cell to multi-celled, went through the fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal farm. They've already decided that. That's unquestionably true in their religion, and evolution's a religion, okay? So they've already decided if I find a fish in a fossil in a rock, that's got to be a certain age. If I find a bird, it can't be the same age. Because it's all based on the assumption that evolution is true. It's just absolutely stupid. I'm totally humble, unbiased opinion. Go ahead.
Well, sure.
Appreciate that. Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So basically, I feel like you're kind of mixing up two different types of ages here, so to speak, because there are relative ages, the order of events, for example. And what I was going to say earlier was basically an event here, for example, would be the crystallization of zircon, say, in a magma chamber. And that's kind of an event that's happened, and you can determine, okay, like I said, by bracketing these ages or these different layers, this is the order of events. That's a relative age, basically. Okay, this happened older than this happened much earlier than this happened much later than this. And that's what basically the index fossils are used for, is determining these relative ages. The radiometric dating is used to determine numerical ages. So that's a key difference there, and that's why it's not circular reasoning.
Okay, let's let Kent respond to that. Go ahead, Kent.
Okay, this is all still based on the assumption that all those layers couldn't form in 1 year. If the world was destroyed by a global flood, everything's being shaken up, moved around, redistributed. The animals are going to tend to be sorted based upon their body density, based upon their habitat, based upon their intelligence, based upon their mobility. Nothing to do with evolution. You're probably going to find most of the dinosaurs in one layer because they hang out with each other. I bet if there was a flood today, you probably wouldn't find many coyote fossils in the same layer as birds, because they don't hang out together. So there are so many other logical reasons for any kind of sorting to the geologic strata we see, other than what you guys have already decided. You've already decided reptiles turn to, or fish turn to amphibians. That's already determined in your mind. Now, if we find a fish fossil, we have to assign it this layer and this age. And now we can bracket the ones in between by the fossils we find. The layers are dated by the fossils, and the fossils are dated by the layers. It is pure circular reasoning. I don't know how you guys can't see it. There is no such thing as a geologic column. Go ahead.
Andrew, go ahead.
Well, sure. Okay, so let me address the first thing you said there. Basically, is the geologic column, these or I should say, I guess, since we don't agree on that, the rock layers in this case, you're suggesting that they were, I guess, deposited by a combination of ecological zonation, hydrologic sorting, and mobility of whatever creatures existed at the time, right?
Well, you can buy one of these sand toys at Walmart for $10. I'll buy it for you if you'd like. It'll make 20 or 30 layers in minutes. It happens while you watch. You guys are stuck. You're stuck with the dumb idea that the layers are millions of years different in age. They formed within minutes of each other, not millions of years.
The reason we know it's not from hydrologic sorting, though, is because you get these different layers stacked on top of each other. You can get sediments with more coarse grains, for example, larger grains on top of sediments that are finer in texture, for example. That wouldn't happen with hydrologic sorting. And even with the fossils, you find, say, in the exact same layer, you find creatures of different sizes and densities by today's standards, and turtles, for example, they're high density, yet they're found below many bird species, for example. So
Go
the
ahead.
hybrid sorting doesn't work.
Turtles being below birds in the fossils would be common sense. Turtles don't fly in the sky. Birds can fly around till they avoid drowning, till the last minute. You talk about the texture of the sand. I live in a gravel pit, 140 acres donated to us. We have thousands of layers. You can come see them. And they are finely stratified. It happens very rapidly with moving water. It does not take millions of years. So for you to think that because the coarse grain sand and the medium grit and the fine grit sand is therefore a different age, no. I just flipped this thing over again. Man, I already made 15 layers in 2 minutes. The layers are all from the flood, but the Bible says at the end of time, the scoffers would be ignorant, willingly ignorant of the flood. Stratification takes place rapidly. Layers can be bent quickly if they're all still soft. Like I showed you, hundreds of examples of bent rock layers. Rocks don't bend. The logical solution to exactly what we see, to look at the evidence and say, wow, there was a flood and the moon tide pulling the water up and down for a year would cause a whole lot of stratification containing lots of dead things. Fossils aren't forming today anywhere that anybody knows of in any significant numbers. Animals die by the millions every day. None of them turn to fossils. But yet fossils are found by the millions. That's an indication of a rapid burial in a flood. But the Bible says the scoffers are willingly ignorant of the flood. The petrified clams in the closed position are found on top of Mount Everest. Clams don't climb mountains very well. And they're closed, petrified. They were buried alive. These are found by the billions. There's a seam in Tennessee, 10 feet thick. Millions and millions of petrified clams closed, buried alive.
Well, if I can respond to something you said earlier.
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, I think you're not quite understanding what I'm saying here, because I'm not saying you have the coarse grain sediments, for example, at the very bottom, then the finer grain sediments closer to the top. You don't get this. What I'm saying is you can have sedimentary layers where, for example, at the bottom of a certain formation, a certain sequence, you have layers made of finer sediments, which would usually be at the surface if hydrologic sorting was true, and above them, then you get, say, these gravel deposits, or say deposits where there are larger grains inside the sediments to begin with. So I still don't see how hydrologic sorting would naturally form these layers of different sediments that clearly aren't laid down by sediments floating down the water.
Well, each tide is going to be a totally different event. Each time the tide comes up 200 feet in a liquid-covered planet, if the Earth were completely covered with liquid, the tide would not get interrupted and it will go up and down 200 feet. It's called a harmonic tide. Each tidal event, every 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes, is going to make a new bracket of different sediments. So you're going to have gravel, sand, clay, and the sand is sorted. Here's our gravel pit right here. Come see it. There is fine grain, coarse grain. And of course, it's automatically sorted that way in minutes. And then you wait 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes till the next tide, and you get another layer going the other direction. So the tide and the flood is the only way to explain the stratification that we see. To say that there are coarse grain, medium grain, fine grain containing different fossils, that may be true. As I showed you, there are petrified trees connecting all the layers. That ought to be a big red flag for those who want to believe the layers are different ages.
Well,
they never address that.
For example, you can find the largest preserved fossil remains, for example, in the fine grain sediments. So the fossil sequence, according to, if, say, hydrologic sorting were true, contradicts hydrologic sorting explanation for the sediments themselves. Because usually for the fossil to be a larger animal to be preserved, you need these fine grained sediments, and that's where we find them. We don't find them in, say, gravel layers or anything like that.
First, I don't know that that's true. If fossils aren't found in coarse grain gravel, is that what you're saying?
Right, yeah, they're the largest ones usually aren't.
I don't know how could that be documented. I'm going to go check around every fossil they found in the world.
Okay,
First
sure.
of all,
You want to check it. So I guess go.
Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew. I accidentally muted you. Let's just allow Kent to respond to that
Yeah,
part,
sure.
and then maybe make your next point. Go ahead, Kent.
Okay. I would say, as I mentioned, the fact that we have fossils at all indicates rapid burial. Animals die today, and they get scattered all over the woods by the coyotes and the owls and the ants drag stuff around. We find fully articulated skeletons of dinosaurs, all the bones still connected. Lots of animals are found fully articulated, fossilized. They didn't lay around for a long time and get scavenged. They were buried rapidly. We don't find fossils forming today anywhere that I'm aware of in any significant numbers. The fact that we have fossils at all is indication of rapid burial. The fact that we have trillions of petrified clams found closed indicates rapid burial. The whole top of Mount Everest, 2,000 feet of that mountain, the top 2,000 feet is sedimentary rock full of clams, closed, petrified clams. I think they were buried rapidly, alive. So the fossils formed, I think the only logical explanation is the flood. I don't know you at all, rational empiricist, but I suspect you're talked about in 2 Peter chapter 3, a scoffer that's willingly ignorant of the flood. You don't want that flood story to be true, because that means God has authority to judge his creation. Oh, no. Yeah, he does, and he will, and he's going to do it again. So the layers are not different ages. During the flood, while the tide's coming up and down and coming in and out, the velocity of the water is going to change depending on a number of factors. Contour of the ground. Is the moon at apogee or perigee? Is the moon and the sun lined up? Do you have anyway, there's a lot of, so the velocity of the water moving back and forth is going to determine the particle size, whether it's coarse grain or fine grain. This is hydrologic 101. Anybody that does anything in mining knows they have to, when they pump fluids with sand in it, it's going to sort the sand into by particle size. And also you get sorting by density. What type of sand is it? There's so many factors here. I think the only logical explanation is, like the Bible says, it was destroyed by a flood. It's not logical to claim the layers are different ages when you see petrified trees connecting all of them.
Well,
the other point too, Kent, is the erosion rates, secular erosion rates of the denudation of the landscape within 10 to 12 million years. I mean, we shouldn't be finding any fossils whatsoever. They should all have eroded away. The other point too, Andrew, in a lake deposition, okay, the bottom layer in the lake, I think you'll agree, would have been eroded from the surface of a nearby hill or landscape, and it would have been washed into the bottom of the lake. Now that is a younger layer, the youngest layer. Now subsequent erosion will then erode the next oldest layer on top of that. So what you have in a lake deposition is a reversal of the ages you had on the landscape. Do you understand that logic?
Go ahead, Andrew.
You're saying the ones deposited first are youngest? That you're contradicting yourself there.
No, in a lake, okay? If you get deposition in a lake, that deposition comes from a nearby hill or landscape, which is then considered, which was originally considered youngest. That youngest layer is washed into the lake at the base of the lake. Now, subsequent erosion will then fall on top of that layer in the lake. So effectively what you're doing is you're reversing the ages of the original ages in a lake deposition situation.
Well, sure, yeah, but this is what I was kind of talking about earlier. Is your one sec.
Actually, if I could, because I know Kent's only got a few more minutes. Time has flown by. Kent, you've been so generous with your time, brother. I do have.
Sorry, I know I took a lot of that time up, so I'm sorry for that.
Oh no, that's good. That was good. That was a very enjoyable back and forth between you and Kent. But I do want to make sure before Kent gets out of here. Ken Rock, I see you here as well, and I know you had a question on the geologic column for Kent, and I want to make sure you get your question or objection in here. Ken, you just make sure to unmute yourself. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, sorry about that. I wasn't trying to interrupt. And so my biggest problem, I've been listening for a little bit. My biggest problem is similar to what I've had last time we talked, was a lot of your arguments seem to come from the argument of possibility, and I'm also hearing some arguments of absurdity. So basically, because an argument sounds absurd, then that means it is absurd. What are your objections to those, or how would you justify those within your arguments so far?
I don't think I understand a word he said.
I think Ken is saying that your arguments, Kent, are arguments from Kent. Did you say absurdity? Like you're saying Kent is making an argument that he doesn't think this is possible, and therefore...
Okay.
It seems to be a combination of an argument of possibility because other things are possible, or because some other things have happened. That means that it just negates what is being said, and that's not an argument against what's being said. It's just an argument to possibility, which says that something could happen. And then an argument of absurdity because something sounds crazy that it can't happen. It's I'm saying his arguments sound like a combination of the two.
Okay, I understand that, and I disagree completely. I think if I showed you a fossil fish swallowing another fish, like right here on my screen, they find these by the millions all over the world. We've got some in our science center. You can come see them. Here's a fish, got another fish down his throat, and they're both fossilized in that position. It would be absurd to say they held that position for thousands of years or millions of years until they fossilized. I think the only logical explanation of finding a fossil like this is rapid burial. Anything else is absurd. So the argument from absurdity does not mean it's not true. I think it would be absurd. They have rodeos in Texas where they ride cows and jump over fences. And they train the cows to jump higher and higher. Take them to the gym, make them work out, build them up like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Someday, if they do that, they're going to get a cow to jump over the moon. No, there's a limit to how far the cow's going to jump. The fossils that we find indicate rapid burial. It is absurd to think these fossils form slowly. Yes, that's an argument from absurdity, because it is absurd. Here's a whole school of fish fossilized in the swimming position. I think there was rapid burial. I don't know of another explanation. Petrified clams, by the millions, billions, maybe trillions, are found in the closed position. It's absurd to think the clams sat there on the bottom and slowly fossilized, and when they die, they open right away, and somebody eats them, the crabs or the seagulls or the fish. Petrified closed clams indicate rapid burial. It's absurd to think a petrified closed clam could petrify slowly over millions of years. Yes, I'm sorry, it is absurd. I use the word stupid more freely, but go ahead.
Oh no, that's fair, but that's kind of the problem there, is just because it sounds absurd doesn't necessarily mean it's false. You would have to go into the specific details of why it's false. Otherwise, you're just committing the fallacy of argument to absurdity. So you said one of the arguments. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, Kent did provide a few lines of evidence as to why.
I was about to explain why the ones he gave weren't exactly the best.
Sure, go ahead, and then we'll let Kent respond.
So one of the examples that you gave was if you took a cow, because the cow can jump, you'll never get a cow that can jump over the moon. And yes, you could say that's technically true. You would have to prove that why it wouldn't be true as well. Not necessarily saying that it couldn't, but just because you say that it's absurd that it couldn't happen doesn't necessarily make it untrue. You said something about clams closing in the upright position, and that if they didn't, that would be absurd as well.
Donnie, I didn't follow. I can't understand half of what he says. Okay, he needs to learn to quit mumbling. But the cow jumping over the moon is an example to show, yes, you can train a cow to jump, and you might get him to jump higher. But there's a limit how high a cow can jump. You guys want to say everything is related. We see 500 varieties of apples now being raised around the world, and they might have had a common ancestor called an apple. Okay, Therefore, because we see all the varieties of apples, that proves apples are related to whales. In the evolution mind, they've got them all connected on a family tree. Do you believe, Ken, do you believe you are related to an apple over any amount of time?
Ken, do you believe you're related to an apple?
I don't believe I'm related directly to the apple in the same way that I would be directly related to, like, my cousins or my brothers or sisters.
I'm gonna jump in because I just wanted to be more of a simple answer. Do you believe that humans and apples are related through common ancestry? Do they both belong on that universal common ancestry tree that goes right back to the base? Would you say?
Yeah, that's a slightly different question than that I would agree to directly. Yeah.
Okay, Kent. So
sorry as well if I'm rushing.
Yes. No worries, no worries.
So we've got some evolutionists who admit they're related to a strawberry. Others are related to an apple now. What else did we get? That's absurd. That's an argument from absurdity. We see varieties of apple. We see cows able to jump higher. There are limits. There's probably a limit to how fast man can run. They've now got the 100-yard dash down to, what, less than 9 seconds. Do you think they'll ever get the 100-yard dash down to 1 second? Or is there a limit? Maybe they reach the limit. I don't know. But there is a limit. You guys see the varieties produced, like all the varieties of apples or 115 varieties of pine trees. Okay. Therefore, pine trees are related to whales? This is what the charts are showing the kids in school, and I object to this. This is propaganda. This is not science. Let me get it here. Family tree. You guys show it like it's science and expect the kids to learn it and be tested on it and flunk if they don't. Here you go. And flunk if they don't go for this. Slide number 60. Do you believe these family trees like this, which shows bears, humans, birds, apples, everything connected to a common ancestor, do you believe this represents science? Ken?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I feel sorry for you.
Thank you.
Well, if I could, Ken, if I could, Ken, real quick, I guess. So, apples and humans are related through common ancestry. You agree to the chart that Kent put forward. What would be your best line of evidence for why you and an apple are related that you could present Kent with? What would be your favorite line of evidence for that?
If I were to go through this right now, and we're not necessarily on the topic of evolution, but if you wanted this line of evidence, I would put for my best line forward. I would say that Kent would generally agree that most fruits are generally related. Would you agree with that, Kent?
Okay, no. So he's asking, are all fruits related, Kent?
No, I think God created apples. I think he created pears. I'll just pick a wild number and say there are 500 kinds of fruits in the world. They now have diversified into 40,000 varieties. Okay, most of them done by man for a particular reason. They want the apple to grow in hot climate or cold climate or sandy soil or acid soil. So man has developed apples from the apple root stock to have all kinds of apples. That's not evolution. It's a variation of the same kind. It's an apple. That doesn't prove this chart, which says sharks are related to apples. I'm sorry. It's such idiot propaganda. I don't know how you guys swallowed that, but they believed a lot of dumb stuff for a long time. I shared that at the beginning. So it's time we get it straight. There's no geologic column. No animal ever produces offspring other than its same kind. You can draw lines on paper connecting them. They got this one. Let's see. The octopus and the shark and the broccoli have a common ancestor. Do you believe that?
Do I believe what again? The shark, the broccoli, and the octopus have the same ancestors?
Yeah, do you believe sharks and broccoli came from a common ancestor?
I think they come from something that came from something that had a common ancestor. I think it goes a lot deeper than the way you're making it sound. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at the beginning of this, was the you're saying that because it sounds absurd that it can't be true. You were talking earlier about how runners would have a limit to how far they could run, but you also admitted you wouldn't know. So that's kind of the problem there, is that's still just the argument from absurdity. The fact that you would admit that you don't know what that limit would mean would prove that there's no actual limit that you could prove.
Okay. Until we know it's not science, and it should not be taught as science, this family tree is propaganda. We do not know that broccoli and sharks have a common ancestor. You can believe it if you want, but it's not science. My objection is, in science class, teach science. The word science means knowledge. Know, seer, Latin, seer. What do we know? We know sharks make baby sharks. We know that. We do not know sharks and broccoli are related. We know humans make baby humans every time. You're a doctor, you agree? People make people, no exceptions. Now, if you wish to believe you're related to broccoli or an apple, that's not science. Even if it's true, we haven't proven it yet, so you don't know that. You can't include that in science class. It's a religious belief you guys have. You should keep it home. Teach your kids at home if you want. But I don't want my kids taught that stuff, that's for sure.
Ken, let's just say, here's the last question I'll say, and we're going to have to wrap it up here. But this has been a ton of fun. We've had a huge audience the whole night. Time has flown by. If you were in an elevator with somebody and, you know, they really wanted just a piece of scientific, something that's empirical, right? Scientific evidence for why you and broccoli are related through common ancestry, you know, and they really were looking for a piece of scientific evidence with an open mind. You know, what would you provide them?
That was for Ken?
Yeah, for Ken.
As of this, sorry, I'm gonna have to go. It's starting to get kind of loud here. I'm not gonna be able to answer the question. I'm sorry.
No worries, Ken. I appreciate you being here. We're gonna have, I think, one last person here, Synagogue. Brother, good to have you here. I'm not sure if you're still here. I do appreciate your patience. Andrew and Ken, thank you so much for joining with your questions, objections, criticisms. CJ, I'm not sure if you're still there. I do appreciate your patience. I'm guessing you had a question as well for Kent, and I think we're gonna wrap it up here. That brings us to everybody. CJ, are you still there? Okay, he may have stepped away. Okay, well, Kent. Yes,
Donny,
George.
How many arguments from absurdity have you heard from evolutionists? Like the ancestors of the octopus hitching a ride on a meteor or an asteroid.
Yeah, they got some wild stories.
That's just
Surfing
one.
monkey.
I mean, their whole story is full of absurdities. I have to go. Nice to meet you again, Kent.
What was that question?
George? Oh, he was saying, he was just saying he's going to get out of here. George, I appreciate you're all the way in Australia. So
nice
thank
to
you
meet
so much.
you, Kent. Again.
He said, nice to see you again, Kent.
Okay. All right. Hey, come visit America. We'll teach you to speak English.
Oh, well, I'll stick to Australian. See you later, guys.
All right.
Okay, George. Appreciate it, brother. Okay, well, Dr. Hovind, thank you for giving us, 2 hours of your time. We did get a couple, brave evolutionists to come on in here and give some objections and some arguments. So, kudos to them. So, Ken, any final words, final thoughts before we wrap it up here on, I guess, everything we've talked about tonight?
Well, I guess I would share with these evolutionists or people who believe in evolution, Pascal's wager. What I believe, that God created everything and he wrote a book and told us how he did it, and everything brings forth after its kind. That's all we've ever seen. There's no doctor in the world, no farmer on the planet will tell you has ever seen an exception to this. Now, they might draw lines on paper imagining how it happened, but that's not science. But suppose I'm wrong. Suppose there is no God. Suppose everything has happened by chance and I die. Okay. I go back to the grave like everybody else. I haven't lost a thing. I've had a wonderful life. I enjoy life, enjoy my family. I haven't lost a thing. Pascal's wager. If I'm right and they're wrong, they've lost it all. They've lost it all. I've had 53 years of fellowship with my Heavenly Father. I gave my heart to him 53 years ago. And he moved in, started changing me from the inside. I'd like to see him move into everybody's heart, get on the inside and do some work. And just say, Lord, I'm a sinner. Would you please forgive me and save me? Come live inside and forgive me. And he will. And then he may want to change some things in your life. He had a whole long list on me to change. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but he's still working on a couple of them. Okay? But what about you? Where are you going if you die? You just die? You sure? You real sure? Real sure. If not, give me a call. 855-BIG-DINO, extension 3. I'll be glad to lead you to the Lord over the phone. Thank you.
Amen, brother. Beautiful final words. Nothing more important than salvation. Where are you going? when you die. You know, eternity is a long time, Brother Kent. So I appreciate all you do for the Lord, all the time you give us for these important discussions. I'm going to let you get out of here. You know, again, thank you so much. You've got a busy couple months too. We got a lot of debates for you, and you've got a boot camp coming up, Kent. So, you know, I'll be praying for that, brother.
All right.
God
Thank you
bless
so much, guys. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right. There we go. 2 hours. We've had a fantastic audience the entire time. Doki Doki Bible Club. Thank you for the super stickers, brother. He says, amen, amen. So, you know, as I've said, this is the summer of debates, including the Evolution Debate Challenge series. So if you want to take the Evolution Debate Challenge, please reach out. I think we've now done about 30 of them at this point, and we've got another dozen over the next couple months. Okay. So Kent was a bit under the weather there for a little bit. So we wanted to make sure he was at tip top shape for his next debate. And he was very gracious to still do tonight's show, even though he's not 100%. So, you know, that was 2 hours and very comprehensive. What we want to do is do more of these kind of call-in shows on different topics. So tonight was the Geologic Column. You know, maybe in a couple weeks, we'll pick another topic, maybe evolution, age of the earth, and we can pick a video to review, you know, like we did tonight. And then we can just open it up, you know, people with questions, criticisms, objections. You know, critical thinking is important. So we don't all have to agree on everything to come together for these important discussions, as long as we keep them sophisticated and respectful. Okay, so Atheist Junior and Dr. Dino, I believe we're going to be rescheduling this one for a couple weeks from now, okay? Because we've got a debate nearly every single night. We've got a double header night coming up just to fit these in. So we're going to be having T-Rock and James W. Okay, they are going to be debating at 10 at night, Noah's Ark and the global flood. That's going to be awesome. And at 8, we're going to have Kent and Snake was right. Okay, this is going to be specifically on transitional fossils. So since we've done so many of these evolution debates, we are now scheduling debates specific to one topic, one line of evidence. So that's why Snake and Kent are going to be debating transitional fossils. Okay, we've also got James W. and Kent who will be debating the hominid fossil record. So that should be fun, as well as the much anticipated round 2 between T-Jump and Kent. This will be on testable predictions. Okay. And that's what we have for you in terms of evolution. But we got a ton of debates on, you know, the nature of God. We've got debates on soteriology. So, you know, this is a debate we got coming up. Matt Slick, John Barton, is oneness biblical? So this is going to be a ton of fun. Matt Slick, you know, he's been here 7 or 8 times, and he's going to be here in July and August. Okay, so I have debates for August that I'm now working on setting up. We're also going to have Kelly Powers and Taylor Stewart. They will be debating Unitarianism. Then the other day, we just had a formal debate on the Bible translation issue. Nick Sayers and CJ Cox both did a fantastic job. Very intellectual and scholarly debate. Easy job for me that night. I almost had to do nothing as a moderator. So that was, I was incredibly thankful for that. So we've got another one. Got another one coming up. 2 more, actually. This one's going to be Will Kinney and Turretin Fan. Again, 2 well-educated individuals on this topic. King James only controversy. Looking forward to that. You know, in-house debate should be a lot of fun. And then at the end of July, we've also got one with Eddie from Brute Facts podcast, I think it's called, who will be debating. He's going to be debating Nick Sayers. So again, you know, I've been doing this creation versus evolution conversation podcast, okay, where I just did one with Andrew Cumming, actually, who was on here tonight. We discussed endogenous retroviruses, and I'm in the works with several other evolutionists in terms of this podcast series. Okay, so you know, I've done a ton of formal debates, I think about 100, but now that I'm just doing so much behind the scenes work plus moderating and hosting, it's really hard for me to do my own formal debate. So that's why I started this podcast. Okay, so if there's something you want to talk to me about, creation versus evolution wise, reach out, set it up, through email, and we'll do it here on the channel. So episode 1 was with Ken Rock, who was here tonight. And then also Andrew Cumming was episode 2, who again was here tonight. So I do appreciate those evolutionists that are willing to enter the octagon and engage in these important discussions. Okay, I really appreciate that. And I'm just looking at my events here. I guess last thing is I'll thank everybody who's supported us, the ministry through getting the endogenous retrovirus handbook. The limited edition turned out to be so cool that we were just going to keep it for a week, but now I think we've had it for 3 weeks. Okay, so if you have not yet picked up the endogenous retrovirus handbook, what are you waiting for? Okay, pick it up. It's the most comprehensive response to endogenous retroviruses as evidence for common descent that you'll find. And I've got several debates actually that I'm working on scheduling. I think the next one's going to be with Luca Medugno, a chemistry teacher over in Italy. He says he's working through the book right now, and we're going to have a respectful debate on it, as well as a round 2 with Snake Was Right. So we're working on that as well. I see Wade the Wizard was mentioned in the live chat. So remember, Endgame on June 30th. Time is flying by. So June 30th, Wade the Wizard and Dr. Dino in the house. All right, let me just quickly look at the chat. I do apologize for anybody whose super chats I did not get to. We were supposed to do about an hour and a half, and we went 2 hours. So, I didn't want to keep Kent forever. He was generous enough with his time. So I do appreciate your patience with me. And if I didn't get to your super chat question, make sure you're here for the next debate. Send it in, and I'll make sure that I get to it and ask it during the debates, because I do want to make sure I'm honoring all the donations that come in. So Doki Doki Bible Club, I appreciate that, brother. Future debates, interviews, supporting SFT ministry, keeping us full time. Patreon.com, creationistclothing.com for our award-winning Evolutionist Tears mug. So best way to start the day. Nice warm cup of Evolutionist Tears. I do appreciate the sense of humor that our Evolutionist fans have. Okay, so, and then check the website. standingfortruthministries.com. Endless content. Go into the video section and you'll find answers to all your questions, whether it's age of the earth related, geology related, ancestry related. That's kind of my specialty, and that is what I focus on when it comes to the global flood. We've got our team engineer and geologist, Professor David McQueen and George Bond, who was here tonight, and Sam Jenkins' brother. Sam Jenkins is part of the creation research team over in UK and Australia, with John Mackay, the creation guy, and Joseph Hubbard. So Sam, if you're just getting here, brother, we went over some of the slides and visuals from that must-watch Flood Boundaries Conference. 6 hours, roughly, Flood Boundaries Conference with Joseph Hubbard and John Mackay. So good to see you. And Cram, appreciate it. So that's really all that comes to mind. And again, that's just a snapshot of the overall content that we have for you over the next week. Okay, here's the last thing I'll say. Tomorrow we got another open mic. Okay, so we've been doing these open mics, and we've been getting panels of 10. And the panel consists of multiple different views. That's what we want to do, is we want to come together. Okay, we don't want this to be an echo chamber. Brothers and sisters from different views, and do these open mics like a panel, and just engage points. So I think the last one we did was James 2. So this one's going to be John 15. So bring your best hermeneutical breakdown for John 15. It'll be, I'm sure, another all-nighter. And I believe that's actually going to be tomorrow night, okay? Because Saturday we have a debate on soteriology between Charles Jennings and Daniel Mira. So I'm sure that'll consist of an after show. Atheist Junior likes the mug. Appreciate it. And I look forward to your debate with Kent coming up. So I think that's pretty much it. Mr. Greeny. Yeah, YouTube membership available now. So you can become a faithful Standing for Truth YouTube member. Okay, that's all I got, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go have some food here, refuel my coffee, And we'll see you tomorrow night for the epic open mic showdown. God bless all.